Hey, what's up? So I got something for you today that I think you're really going to find useful, and that's because it's happened to me. And over the last couple of months, I started noticing something strange when I was using AI, especially things like ChatGPT. It's not that the answers were necessarily bad, which is actually what kind of made this difficult to actually recognize and notice. But every once in a while, I would get a suggestion or a response in a way where I'd start to think like, what the hell, where the hell did this come from? This doesn't really sound too much like me. Maybe the tone felt a little off, or sometimes it would suggest something that I personally didn't have any interest in. And other times the answer, it did make sense, but it felt like it was meant for somebody completely different, right? And after seeing this happen more and more, I started to look into why this was happening. I had a pretty good idea, but it's when I realized that it was that ChatGPT was quietly kind of building the wrong personality, the wrong identity. And it wasn't because all of the information was wrong. It was because some of that information didn't actually belong to me. So I'm going to share my screen right now and kind of go over this with you. So let's hop into that real quick. So the ChatGPT account that we use is actually mine, but my wife, Nikki, will occasionally use one of my computers while one of my accounts is already logged in. It could be my Mac Mini, it could be my MacBook, it could be the iMac, whatever it might be. And this was actually something that we never really thought too much about. She just kind of needed to use ChatGPT or an AI. The computer was already logged in, and it was just easier than having to switch over and go into her own account, which is a free account anyway that she, uses occasionally, right? My wife, Nikki, she's a first grade teacher. She does a lot of stuff with social media as well, and a lot of stuff with many of the other faceless YouTube channels that we run and operate from the house. So the way that she uses ChatGPT is significantly different from the way that I actually use it. As you probably know, I spend a tremendous amount of time experimenting with large language models, as well as like AI image generation, AI video, AI music, regular music, workflows, research, things like that, stuff with my ADHD. And a lot of the time, I want ChatGPT or AI to challenge an idea, to compare different options or help me investigate something. But Nikki, she might be looking for something a lot more practical, a lot more straightforward, that's friendly, that's audience friendly for some of the social media accounts that we do, and all that kind of stuff. But the thing is that none of those approaches, or neither one of those approaches, they're not wrong. They're just meant for two completely different people, right? We are usually doing completely different things. See, the important thing here is that Nikki and I are usually not working on the same projects, right? I'm doing my things. She's normally doing hers. I could be working on AI image generation for an AI movie, or something for music, or something with a large language model, something related to my ADHD, my personal growth, whatever it might be. She might be working on something for her educational stuff, being a first grade teacher, one of the other channels that we run, or one of the social media accounts that we have. So this wasn't a problem where we were both giving ChatGPT like conflicting directions inside the same project. The problem was really that all of those things, all of those interests, the different preferences, the corrections that I might have made or she might have made, those ways of working were being added through the same account. So when one of us started a new conversation, ChatGPT didn't really always recognize which kind of information should influence its response, should basically how it should respond. Like I might get a suggestion that made much more sense for Nikki, where she might get an answer that was a lot more analytical or complicated than what she actually needed for what she was doing. The account, the AI, had learned information about both of us, but it didn't always seem to know which person or identity that information belonged to. See, at first, I didn't connect all of this. I thought maybe I had just not explained the prompt clearly enough or something like that. Maybe it just misunderstood what I wanted, and maybe it was just one of those kind of strange AI responses that you sometimes get. But then I started noticing that this was happening a lot more often. And this was around the same time that Nikki had started using my computers and kind of my office space a lot more often than she used to do. Now, she's home a lot more now because she's off for the summer, being that she's a teacher. So naturally, she's got a lot more time to work on a lot of her own things. But I was wondering why she kind of kept coming back into where I work usually, instead of using one of the other kind of setups that we have in the house. So I actually asked her, and it didn't have anything to do really with my computer. Let me explain. So as you might have noticed, if you've seen my videos before, I am in a new office chair. And this portion of the video, very, very short, is actually sponsored by eWin Racing, which is where my new chair is from. And when I asked Nikki why she kind of kept coming over to my workspace and using my computers, she kind of started to giggle a little bit. And she admitted that it was actually because of the new chair. She wasn't coming over because the computer was better. She was coming over because the chair was that much better. And I do completely understand it. She's home now. So she's starting to see that when you spend a tremendous amount of time sitting at a computer, sitting at an office desk, like we do, like I do, a chair makes a huge difference. But here's the thing. You might watch one of my videos and it's 8, 10, 15 minutes long. The thing is that what you're not seeing is the amount of hours of testing and experimenting that I might have had to do before I even turned on the camera to actually record the actual video. So now, depending on what I'm working on, I could be testing a large language model, generating images for whatever reason, or could be for an AI movie, or I'm doing something with AI music or my own music, or trying a new workflow. So a lot of that process is trial and error. And you end up spending sometimes hours on it. And to be honest with you, that's really where I want this channel to continue going. I want to spend that time experimenting with all these different parts of AI and then come back and tell you what's working or what's not working and what failed or whether I think something is actually worth your time. I don't want to just repeat an announcement or tell you what company says its tool can do. I want to push things. I want to use it. I want to kind of break things when possible and then give you honest feedback based on what happens. And that takes time. Right? See, when you're doing that for hours at a time, you have to be comfortable. I'm sure you understand that, because otherwise, if you don't, you stop thinking about what you're actually working on. You stop thinking about the experiment. And for me, like, I would start thinking about how much my back was hurting me or my neck, or how much longer I can actually sit here in this kind of uncomfortable chair. So that's why I started looking for a new chair to actually get. And the one that I actually picked is this eWin Flash XL upgraded series chair, right? Reason is, look, I'm 6'3". I weigh about 220 pounds. So this chair that I'm sitting in right now, the extra room is one of the things that I was looking for. One of the first things I noticed about this chair. I don't feel like I'm trying to squeeze myself into a chair that's built for just someone smaller, like my wife, who's like 5'5" and 120 pounds. Another thing is, I want comfort. This seat uses temperature and pressure sensitive cold cure foam that adapts to my body heat and also my weight. And what's also nice, it also has a built-in 4-way lumbar support with a magnetic foam headrest that can be changed and moved around and repositioned instead of kind of being locked into one spot. It's super comfortable. And those are the kind of things, the features that I actually noticed when I'm actually sitting down for a long time and doing a lot of this experimentation, right? And that's why I wanted to actually use this chair, get this chair. And apparently eWin, the company that makes this chair, made the chair a little bit too comfortable because as you are well aware, I'm now competing with Nikki to actually sit down in my own office workspace and get things done. So here's the thing. This chair, I love it. I'm promoting it to you. You can actually save 25% on this by using the discount code Craig. And you could use it on either this chair or anything on the eWin Racing website. I'll have the website linked in the description below. And if you're watching this, you'll see that there's a QR code on the screen right now. You could scan that. It'll take you directly to the website. And again, just remember to use the code Craig, C-R-A-I-G, at checkout for 25% off. Thanks so much for eWin Racing for sponsoring this video and for apparently giving Nikki just another reason to want to keep taking over the areas that I work all day long. Now, obviously, the chair didn't create this problem, but because Nikki's home for the summer and using my kind of work area and my ChatGPT account more frequently, I started noticing these kind of mismatched responses a lot more often. And again, we're not constantly going into each other's projects and things like that. It was most of the time I was doing my own work and she was doing hers. The problem was that the account contained information that was kind of reoccurring from myself and from her. And ChatGPT didn't really seem to know which person it should be responding to. And I felt that was an important thing, right? Because at first I thought this was just kind of annoying because maybe the tone was just a little bit off. Maybe the suggestion just didn't kind of fit what I was looking for. But then I started thinking about all of the areas where the person behind the question or what we're asking AI to do really actually matters, right? So these are things like when you get a recommendation or when you're looking for some kind of a decision, a business decision, a direction, a creative direction, right? This is huge. I have ADHD. If you couldn't tell, I do a lot of research and things like that on personal development and goals and things like that and trying to hit those. So that kind of advice and things like that is important to me, not so much to Nikki. So that's when I realized that this actually has become a much bigger issue than just receiving kind of an awkwardly kind of off response. And I want you to think about that. Think about your own setup for a second, right? Does your spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, or anything ever jump onto your computer while you're logged into one of your accounts? Do your kids or nephews or nieces or something like that sometimes log into your account, or maybe a coworker, an assistant, or business partner, right? Now, maybe this doesn't happen constantly, but it does happen often enough that the other person that started kind of creating their own patterns inside your account is happening, right? So ChatGPT and other AIs is not going to suddenly stop and say, I have no idea which one of you I'm talking to. It's going to probably just give you, or it is going to give you an answer that sounds good, but it's not really meant for you. It's kind of meant for the combined version of the different people that are constantly using your account. And again, maybe you notice it because the tone just sounds, it seems strange to you, or the recommendation doesn't fit your interests and it's kind of matching somebody else, or it's suggesting things that you have no intention of doing, right? Like this is suggesting something to me that's not something that I'm working. This is not my project. This is not what I would normally or how I normally work? Or are you thinking of something else? Are you thinking about somebody else? And that's when you might assume that you have a problem with your prompting, but it's actually that the AI or ChatGPT or whatever may actually be confused about who's actually asking the question to it, right? Now, the thing is, this can also happen when only one person uses the account, because maybe you run several completely different businesses, or you use it for professional use as well as creative use and personal use, very much like what I do. So those things are different. Your AI is going to carry those assumptions from one area into another, right? Maybe you have several different roles where a useful response would get something different depending on the role that you're kind of trying to operate in. Hopefully that makes sense. The real key here is that these differences need to be consistent. They need to be stable, and they need to be like recurring, right? You don't need or want a separate persona every time you want an email to sound more professional, or a response or something like that to be shorter, right? That's just kind of like a normal instruction, a normal prompt. See, a persona, that becomes useful when the identity or the recurring role actually changes what a useful answer should look like to you specifically. So I want to just kind of explain some of the stronger kind of use cases that is similar to what happened with Nikki and myself, right? So one account that's accumulated a ton of information from 2 or more regular users, and the AI occasionally applies the wrong person's preferences or interests or their goals, right? That's where a persona is going to be helpful. It can also really be useful when one person operates several completely different or unrelated brands or businesses or things like that, or when a person has very different kind of recurring professional identities or personalities, right? It's going to help consultants or agencies that repeatedly work within very different kind of client contexts, right? The thing is that personas are also not useful for a lot of things, right? There's things that you need to understand. You don't need a persona for a temporary project, for instance. You don't need one for a simple tone change. And another thing too is that a persona, what we're kind of working on here, it's not going to create an additional source of privacy or security. So this is not a fix for that. It's not going to stop another person that's using your account from seeing your conversations, right? I guess the easiest way to think about this is like this. You're going to use a persona when the person or the recurring identity changes a lot, right? See, at first I thought the solution was going to be pretty simple, to be honest. We would just begin every conversation saying, hey, this is Craig, or hey, this is Nikki, right? And that does help, but that only tells ChatGPT who's sitting at the computer at that moment. It doesn't necessarily tell ChatGPT which parts of the previous history and memory belongs to me or belongs to Nikki, right? It still needs to understand and know which interests are mine and which interests belong to Nikki, or what kind of responses are normally useful to either one of us, right? What information is actually shared, which instructions belong to a particular project or whatever we're working on, or which instructions were only meant for just one small task. That's when I realized that we needed to actually separate this into actually 3 different layers. So the persona tells ChatGPT or the AI who it's actually talking to. And that can include the person's interests, again, the communication preferences, long-term goals, short-term goals, even just general ways of thinking and working. The problem that occurs is when all 3 layers get dumped into just one profile or one account. So what we did was we ended up building 3 separate skills that you add to ChatGPT or Grok or to Claude. Gemini is a little bit different. Usually Gemini, you're probably logging in with your own Gmail account or something like that. So this is really mostly pertains to like Grok, Claude, or ChatGPT. So what we did was I created one persona for me, I created one persona for Nikki, and then one that I called a shared identity router, right? It's kind of what actually ChatGPT called it when we created this, but that's what I'm also calling it as well, right? So Craig's persona, my persona, tells ChatGPT or Grok or Claude that it's speaking to me, and it gives a much better and clearer understanding of the kinds of things that I work on and the way that I usually like to think through something, right? Nikki's persona skill does the same thing, but for her specifically. It lets ChatGPT or Grok or whatever know that this is a completely different person with different interests, different projects they might be working on, and different expectations for what they're going to find is useful and a good response that they're looking for, right? But the third, the router, that acts as kind of like a backup. It's not as necessary, but it is still important, right? Because if neither one of us identifies ourselves, right, by invoking the skill, and the answer depends on who is actually like chatting with the AI, well, then this router is made to ask if this is Craig or if this is Nikki, or in your case, if that's you or your wife or husband or whoever it might be, child, right? So if we ask a basic question where the persona or the identity doesn't matter, the way that I created this, it's not going to just interrupt us and try to figure that out. So that's something important that I want you to kind of understand. And the way that we did this was by building kind of a questionnaire that we're going to get into right now. So the first thing that I had ChatGPT do was look at the major kind of recurring patterns that it recognized and represented in my account. And not every random question that we had ever asked was included in this. It's really only the things that appeared often enough that they could realistically, theoretically affect the response that we're going to get. So again, this could include interest. It could include the professional roles. Again, like Nikki being a teacher, projects that we're working on, the way that we like things communicated back to us, answered back to us, goals that I might have or that she might have, shared information, things like that. Areas where the account could contain or could have contradictory patterns or responses, right? Then the questionnaire asks about one category at a time. Does this belong to Craig? Does this belong to Nikki? Or is it shared? Does it actually belong to a specific project rather than either one of you, either persona, right? Could it belong to either one of us, depending on the conversation? See, some of the categories were too broad, so ChatGPT divided them into smaller pieces with my suggestion. And to be honest, I probably let some of the questioning get a little bit longer than it needed to. So the version that I'm giving you is going to focus on the highest value questions that it would need to do. And then it's going to stop once the major differences have kind of been separated out. And so I put the entire process into a free Notion document that you can get right in the description. It's not going to be some kind of giant course. It's going to contain the information that I'm explaining here a little bit easier, and also has the two main prompts, which is, again, a quick explanation of how to use them, the way to actually upload the actual instructions, and a few tests to make sure that the personas that you're building are actually working, right? The first prompt is going to run the audit, and that's what creates your personalized questionnaire or survey, I guess you could say. The second prompt, it uses your approved answers to create the actual persona skill files, right? So I separated these into two steps because I want you to be able to review the kind of the identity before ChatGPT starts to actually create and generate the actual final skill files. So if something was assigned to the wrong person, it's much easier to correct it at that point than later on. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. The full prompt is included in the Notion doc, right? You just paste it right into ChatGPT or Grok or to Claude. You answer the questions one at a time and then review that kind of completed identity map, I guess you could call it, right? Your questions are not going to be the same as mine and Nikki's because they're going to be completely based on the recurring information that's inside your account that might have gotten kind of all screwed up by how many people you allow to use your account and all that kind of stuff. You don't need to write a full biography. Just let the survey, the questionnaire do its job. So the second prompt that I've also included in the Notion document, this is what takes the kind of approvals that you did and creates a single zip file for each persona along with the shared router when you need that. So here's the thing. You're not trying to document every single conversation that you've ever had in that AI. You really only need a basic, useful first version that captures and contains the major recurring differences that you experience. For most people, I think you can get this done within like maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes max. If the account's really, really screwed up, if it's extremely complicated, then that's when you can spend a little bit more time and you can kind of refine those personas later. The personas also can even be instructed to inform you and notify you when they recognize a recurring pattern that actually may be worth adding or revising in the actual persona. They're never going to just silently rewrite themselves, but they can actually ask and suggest that maybe you want to do an update and ask whether you want to make that change permanent, which is actually pretty cool. So the Notion document, again, is going to be linked in the description below. The Notion doc contains the prompts along with the setup instructions and some test questions. So once the process is finished, once you've actually done this, you should have one zip file for each persona and a separate zip for the router. You upload each one of these separately because each one needs to operate as its own skill inside ChatGPT or Grok or Claude. Then when I begin a conversation, I can activate or invoke my persona or simply state that Craig is speaking or that Nikki is speaking. And now that ChatGPT has a much better, clear signal that it should respond based on my interests, my preferences, all my little nuances instead of Nikki's, right? And if Nikki takes over, she can state that she's the one speaking and activate her skill, her persona. So it works very, very well, and it works very, very easy. Now, one simple test is to ask both personas the same kind of open-ended question. Something like, what type of project do you think I should focus on next? Now, my answer should reflect the things that I'm interested in, the things that I regularly work on, and the way that I normally evaluate and think about an idea. Where Nikki's or your own or whatever, that should reflect her interests and the kind of work that makes sense for her. The goal is not for the AI, ChatGPT or whatever, to force every answer into a stereotype. The goal is for its suggestions, its responses, its answers to be grounded in the correct person's history and their preferences based off of the memory that's built on them that now we're able to do, having these persona skills identified, created, and added to the account. Now, I want to be extremely clear about this and kind of the limitations of this. This is not going to make every answer perfect, right? What it's doing is it's giving ChatGPT or Grok or Claude the persona skills. They give it a much better set of instructions for understanding who it's speaking to and what information should actually be used to kind of guide the response, guide the answer. This is not a privacy system. It does not prevent the other person using the account from seeing or reviewing your conversations, right? It doesn't create separate billing or separate files or completely different memories behind the scenes, right? If two people need completely private conversations or fully separate histories or whatever, separate the accounts into two brand new accounts. That's the much better solution, and that's actually the recommended solution that OpenAI and other AI companies give you. What you want to do is you want to think of this as an identity routing and kind of cleanup layer, right? It's built to reduce confusion, but it's not for getting extra like security boundaries, right? Hopefully that makes sense. So what I originally thought was ChatGPT occasionally was giving me a strange answer, and it turned out to be something that was quite interesting and also very, it was understandable, right? It learned recurring information from two different people, but it didn't have a good system for knowing which person it was actually chatting with, right? Once we separated those identities into their own personas, the responses had a much better chance of actually making sense for me or for Nikki or whoever was asking the actual question. So here's the thing. If another person is occasionally using your AI account and you keep noticing that responses or recommendations or certain assumptions that don't fit, this really might be worth trying out. Because you might not have a prompting problem. Your AI, your tool, may simply just be confused by who's asking it if you are sharing access to your account. Again, the complete process is inside the Notion document. I've linked it below. It includes the questionnaire, the prompt and skill building prompt, and it's got information on how to actually upload the information once you're done, right? Just follow it, and you'll have that first kind of useful version of your personas created in literally like 10 or 15 minutes from now. And I think you're going to really get an idea of how much this is going to actually affect your responses, especially as these new frontier models keep coming out, right? And that's what this whole entire process is actually for. As these models continue to get better, and if you are sharing access, you want to make sure that you're getting the real kind of good answers and good responses that you should be getting, right? And this is going to help create that for you by separating this out and doing that. And this is especially useful if you're not wanting to create a second account or pay for a second account. This is really going to help you out. So other than that, I hope this was helpful. I hope that you understood what this is useful for. Again, check out the Notion document. The Notion document will have all the instructions, everything that you need to do, and get it ready. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. This video did take a little bit longer to explain than I anticipated. Fortunately, sitting in a comfortable chair, which I will be doing from now on. But other than that, thanks so much for watching. Hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please let me know. I will check them in the comments, respond in the comments. And other than that, thanks. This is Craig, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.